The brown paper felt coarse beneath her fingertips, a mundane contrast to the exquisite object hidden within. It was a weight she hadn't expected, a coldness that seeped through the wrapping and into her bones even before she saw it. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, lay the music box. Not new, not pristine, but old, deeply old. Its dark wood, carved with intricate figures that seemed to writhe in the dim light of the hallway. The air thickened, as if the very dust motes held there. Breath, she hadn't asked for this, hadn't sought it out. It simply arrived, an uninvited guest, a phantom limb of a forgotten past. Past she had buried, brick by brick, beneath the foundations of a new life. A life built on fragile peace, a life she desperately clung to. Hesitantly, she lifted the lid, cleek, soft as a sigh, and then the music began. A melody, haunting and ethereal, spun from the silence, weaving its way into the deepest recesses of her mind. It was a tune she didn't recognize, yet somehow, instinctively, knew. A melody that resonated with a dormant ache, a hollow space within, heard that she had long since learned to ignore, and then the light. A sudden, blinding flash erupting from the heart of the music box, momentarily stealing her sight. It wasn't the harsh glare of the sun, but something softer, more insidious. An ethereal glow, the color of moonlight on snow, that danced and shimmered, leaving afterimages burned onto her retinas. For a heartbeat, the world dissolved into a swirling vortex of light and sound. And she felt a pull, a tugging sensation as if something were trying to drag her down into the depths of a forgotten well when her vision cleared. The hallway seemed different, subtly altered. The shadows deeper, the air colder. And in her hand, nestled amongst the velvet lining, a note. A single folded piece of parchment, its edges frayed and yellowed with age. The words were written in a spidery, elegant script, a message both cryptic and terrifying. She remembers. So will you. She remembers. The words echoed in the sudden silence that followed the music, a chilling whisper in the empty house. Who remembers, and what? Her mind recoiled, a wounded animal instinctively retreating to its lair. Memories, fractured and incomplete, flickered at the edges of her awareness. Fleeting images of flames, the acrid smell of smoke, the sound of children crying. But they were just fragments, shards of glass, too sharp and painful to grasp. Mark would dismiss it, he always did. He would tell her it was just stress, the pressure of work, the lingering effects of the move. He would tell her to relax, to breathe, to forget. But she couldn't forget, not anymore. The music box had opened a door she had desperately tried to keep locked. And now the darkness was seeping through the cracks. Her ordinary life, her loving, if slightly oblivious, husband. Her demanding job, designing sterile office spaces that felt increasingly suffocating. The recurring nightmare, the faceless child reaching out from the shadows. It was all connected. She knew it. The music box, the note, the memories, the nightmare. They were all pieces of the same puzzle. A puzzle she was now compelled to solve, even if it meant unraveling the very fabric of her sanity. The town itself, this quiet, secluded haven they had sought, now seemed to hold its breath, watching her, waiting. The old houses, with their shuttered windows and overgrown gardens, seemed to whisper secrets in the wind. The townsfolk, with their polite smiles and averted gazes, seemed to know something she deemed single quotes. She had come here seeking peace, seeking oblivion. A clean slate, a chance to rewrite her story. But the past, it seemed, had other plans. It had followed her, like a shadow, clinging to her heels, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. And now, with the arrival of the music box, it had finally found its voice. The melody lingered in her mind, a haunting refrain that played on repeat. each note a tiny hammer blow against the walls of her carefully constructed reality. Sleep offered. No escape. The nightmare intensified, the faceless child growing closer, its silent screams echoing in the darkness. Days bled into nights. Fueled by anxiety and a desperate need to understand, she found herself drawn to the music box, compelled to open it again and again, to listen to the haunting melody, to bathe in the ethereal light, hoping for a clue, a sign, anything that would make sense of the madness that was consuming her. She researched the music box, poring over antique catalogs and online forums, searching for any mention of its maker, its origins, its history. But it was as if it had appeared out of thin air, a ghost from a forgotten era. The carvings, she noticed, were not merely decorative. They told a story she couldn't quite decipher. Figures danced around a fire, their faces contorted in anguish. A child, standing alone, bathed in a strange light. And a symbol etched into the base of the box, a symbol that seemed both familiar and alien. A knot of interwoven lines that pulsed with an unsettling energy. The first crack appeared in her marriage. Mark, initially supportive, grew increasingly concerned, then frustrated, then distant. He couldn't understand her obsession, her paranoia, her inability to let it go. He saw her slipping away, disappearing into a world he couldn't reach. "It's just a music box, Anna," he would say, his voice laced with exasperation. "It's not real." But to her, it was more real than anything else. It was the key to unlocking the truth about herself, the truth about her past, the truth about the darkness that lurked within. Then, one day, while researching local history at the town library, she stumbled upon a legend, a tale whispered in hushed tones, a story that had been buried beneath layers of time and silence. The legend of the shining child, a child connected to a tragic event, a fire that had consumed an orphanage decades ago, leaving no survivors, a fire that had been deemed an accident, a freak occurrence, but which, according to the legend, had been deliberately set. And the shining child, it was said, was the one responsible. The melody of the music box echoed in her ears. The images of flames danced before her eyes, and a chilling realization dawned upon her. The music box wasn't just a relic from the past. It was a trigger, a key, a gateway. And she, Anna, was somehow connected to the legend of the shining child. To the fire, to the darkness. The world tilted on its axis, and the fragile peace she had so desperately sought shattered into a million pieces. Her reflection in the library. Windows stared back at her, a stranger with haunted eyes. A woman on the precipice of something terrible. But the greatest shock, the most unsettling revelation, was yet to come. An encounter, a chance meeting with an elderly woman, a woman named Alara, who seemed to know more than she let on. A woman who warned her about the music box, about its power to unlock the forgotten, about the dangers of delving too deep into the past. Destroy it, Alara had urged, her voice raspy with age, before it consumes you. But it was too late. The music box had already consumed her. And the past, like a relentless tide, was rising, threatening to engulf her completely. She was trapped, caught in a web of secrets and lies, with no escape in sight. And then, the question that burned in her mind, a question that threatened to unravel her very being. What if the music box wasn't meant to bring back memories? What if it was meant to reveal something far more terrifying? What if she wasn't just remembering the past, but reliving it? The melody lingered, a phantom echo in the silence after the music box closed. It wasn't just a tune, it was a key. Turning slowly, grinding against the rust of forgotten things. We had come here to escape the city's clamor, the relentless demands, the suffocating weight of expectations. A quaint, quiet life promised. a sanctuary built of brick and mortar, far from the ghosts that haunted her waking hours. Little did we know, some ghosts travel well. Our house, nestled on the edge of town, should have been a haven. Sunlight streamed through the leaded glass windows, warming the worn wooden floors. Mark, ever the optimist, saw potential, saw a future blooming in the manicured garden. But Anna saw shadows lengthening in the corners, felt a chill that no sunlight could dispel. Mark, steady. Reliable Mark, he loved her in the way a gardener tends to a prized rose carefully, diligently, pruning away the thorns, oblivious to the darkness festering beneath the soil. He dismissed her anxieties as stress, prescribed long walks and herbal tea. He meant well, his heart overflowing with a love that felt, at times, like a gilded cage. He couldn't see the tendrils of unease coiling around her heart, tightening with each passing day. He couldn't understand. She tried to explain, to articulate the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong, that the very air around them hummed with a discordant energy. But the words caught in her throat, dissolving into a vague, unsettling feeling that she couldn't grasp. It was like trying to describe a color she'd never seen, a sound she'd never heard. Sleep offered no solace, only a descent into the recurring nightmare. A child, always faceless, standing amidst flames that licked at the sky. The air thick with smoke, the screams muffled, distant, yet echoing inside her skull. She would wake up gasping, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, the scent of smoke clinging to her nostrils. These weren't just dreams, they were fragments, shards of glass reflecting a past she couldn't quite piece together. Her work, architecture, usually a source of solace, became another battleground. Lines blurred on blueprints, perspectives shifted, the elegant symmetry of her designs dissolving into chaotic scribbles. The city council's demands for the new community center design felt like a cruel joke. How could she build something solid, something enduring, when her own foundations were crumbling? How could she create a sanctuary when she felt so utterly, completely exposed? There was a hollow ache in her chest, a deep-seated loneliness that not even Mark's unwavering affection could fill. It was the loneliness of someone adrift, separated from herself, searching for a harbor that may no longer exist. It was the loneliness of knowing, deep down, that a part of her was missing, a crucial piece of the puzzle that held the key to unlocking the truth. The music box sat on her nightstand, a silent sentinel, its carved surface cool and smooth beneath her fingertips. It beckoned, promising answers, but also threatening to unleash something she wasn't sure she could handle. It was a dangerous game, playing with the past, stirring up long dormant memories. She remembered snippets, fleeting images, a sprawling, imposing building. The scent of pine needles, the sharp tang of disinfectant. A swing set creaking in. The wind, the laughter of children abruptly cut short. But these images were fragmented, disjointed, like pieces of a broken mirror reflecting distorted versions of reality. The town itself seemed to conspire against her peace of mind. Whispers? In the local cafe, sideways glances from shopkeepers, an undercurrent of something unspoken. People were polite, welcoming even, but behind their smiles, she sensed a watchful curiosity, a hidden knowledge that she wasn't privy to. She'd started researching the town's history, poring over dusty archives in the local library. She sought some explanation for the pervasive sense of unease, some clue that might connect the music box, the nightmares, and the unsettling feeling that she didn't belong here. She found accounts of a tragic fire decades ago at a local orphanage. The Shining Hope Orphanage, they had called it then, a beacon of light extinguished in a devastating blaze. Many children perished. The details were sparse, the records incomplete, as if someone had deliberately tried to erase the event from Fort Penches. My celestial abeas from Mabea sex that glides on smoothly, and leaves a wreck. Long-last ink, color/long-lasting color. Many children perish. May/big, my keller/las. My/plate, my/prod, my/believe, my/pride, my/belied. Me, go to so I sit. My made me silai pago it's I mad it's a say be sigray to kip to set a consit lee sig get I kula vans to get the says I can you it's city memory, but the name Shining Child kept resurfacing in local legends. Tales whispered amongst the elders of the town. Mark grew increasingly concerned, his patience wearing thin. He saw her spiraling, consumed by an obsession that he couldn't understand. He pleaded with her to stop, to let go of the past, to focus on the present. "It's just a music box, Anna," he'd say, his voice laced with a weary exasperation. "It's just a bad dream. You're letting it consume you." But it wasn't just a music box. And it wasn't just a bad dream. It was a siren song, luring her deeper into the labyrinth of her own mind, promising to reveal the secrets that lay buried beneath layers of denial and repression. One evening, as the shadows deepened in the living room, she found herself staring at her reflection in the darkened window. A stranger stared back at her, a woman with haunted eyes and a fragile smile. A woman who was slowly losing herself in the echoes of the past. And then, the music box began to play again, seemingly on its own. Its haunting melody filling the silence. A chilling reminder that some doors once opened can never truly be closed. This time, however, the melody felt different. It resonated more intensely. It was no longer just a song. It was a call. A summons from the depths of her forgotten self, beckoning her toward a truth she both desperately craved and desperately feared. This time, a clear and deeply buried memory flashed in her mind, a memory of her own small hand reaching out to touch something, ... and that small forgotten memory felt like a warning, not a revelation. The melody burrowed deeper, a parasitic twin clinging to the edges of her sanity. It was no longer just a tune. It was a key, turning rusted. Locks in the labyrinth of her mind, sleep offered no escape, only amplified echoes of its haunting refrain, weaving themselves into the fabric of her nightmares. The faceless child now stood closer, its presence radiating an unbearable heat. The air thick with the stench of smoke and forgotten screams. Daylight brought little relief. The world seemed muted, draped in a veil of unreality. The familiar comforts of her home offered no solace. The shadows danced with a newfound menace. The music box sat silent, innocently gleaming on the mantelpiece. Yet she knew it, pulsed with a dark energy, a malevolent heart beating just beneath the surface. Research became an obsession. Local history websites, dusty archives in the town library, whispered conversations with wary shopkeepers. All avenues led to the same chilling legend, the tale of the Shining Child, a spectral figure said to haunt the old Blackwood orphanage, a beacon of light amidst unimaginable darkness, forever bound to the night of the fire. The fire that swallowed innocence and left behind only scars, both visible and unseen. Each discovery chipped away at the wall she had so carefully constructed around her. Memories. Fragments surfaced, fleeting images of roaring flames, the frantic cries of children, a suffocating sense of guilt that clung to her like ash. She saw herself a ghost in the periphery of these visions, a silent observer, her small hands trembling. But trembling with what? Fear? Or something far more sinister? Mark watched her from a distance, his brow furrowed with concern. He saw the light fading from her eyes, replaced by a haunted, desperate glimmer. He tried to reach her, to pull her back from the precipice, but his words felt hollow, meaningless against the rising tide of her obsession. He spoke of doctors, of therapists, of finding healthy distractions. But his suggestions were met with a vacant stare, a chilling reminder that she was already lost in a world he couldn't comprehend. The waking hours blurred into a disorienting haze. She saw things, felt things that couldn't be real, flickering shadows taking on monstrous forms. The scent of burning wood lingering in the air even when the fireplace was cold. Faces in the crowd seemed to morph and twist, their eyes burning with accusations she couldn't understand. Paranoia became her constant companion, whispering doubts and suspicions into her ear, feeding her fear with twisted truths. Then came Alara, an old woman weathered and worn, her eyes holding the weight of centuries. She found Anna one afternoon, sitting alone in the town square, staring blankly at the abandoned fountain. There was an unsettling knowing in her gaze, a recognition that pierced through Anna's carefully constructed defenses. The music box. Alara rasped, her voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. It unlocks the forgotten, but some doors are best left sealed. Anna, startled, could only stare back, her throat tight with a fear she couldn't name. That melody, Alara continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. It's a siren's call. It lures you in, promising answers, but only delivers torment. It feeds on your pain, your guilt, until there's nothing left but a hollow shell. Alara spoke of the fire, of the children lost, of the darkness that clung to the town like a shroud. She spoke of the shining child, not as a beacon of hope, but as a harbinger of destruction, a cursed soul forever trapped between worlds. Destroy it, Alara pleaded, her gnarled hand reaching out to touch Anna's arm. Before it destroys you. Before it consumes everything you hold dear. Her words were a chilling prophecy, a desperate warning that echoed the growing dread in Anna's own heart. But even as she recognized the danger, a morbid curiosity held her captive. The need to know, to understand. To finally unravel the mystery of her past was a siren song she couldn't resist. She clutched the image of a younger self. The flickering glow, the rising heat, the music box was more than just a puzzle. It was a mirror reflecting a truth she was terrified to see. The notes seemed to warp, twisting into a mournful dirge, a lullaby sung to a burning world. Mark's touch now felt foreign, laced with a hesitant unease. The warmth was gone, replaced by a chilling reserve. She saw the questions forming in his eyes, the silent accusations that mirrored her own growing self-loathing. Was she losing him? Or was she finally seeing him for who he truly was? A man incapable of understanding the darkness that lurked within. Her soul, Alara's warning echoed in her mind. Before it consumes everything you hold dear. But what if everything she held dear was already consumed? What if the fire had already taken everything, leaving behind only a hollow echo of a life? She returned to the music box, its siren song now an irresistible command. She had to know. She had to understand. She had to face the truth, no matter how horrifying it might be. And as the melody filled the room, the fragmented memories sharpened, coalescing into a single terrifying image. A small hand holding a match, dangerously close to a stack of dry hay. The darkness receded, a tide pulling away from a shore long submerged. It wasn't a gentle ebb, but a forceful, churning withdrawal, leaving behind the wreckage of forgotten things. Faces flickered, distorted and indistinct, like images struggling to surface from a murky pond. The whispers intensified, no longer a chaotic murmur, but fragmented words, sharp as shards of glass. Asterisk, hush. Be quiet. They'll hear you. A child's voice, her voice, deeper, further. The therapist's voice, a calm lighthouse in the storm. Of her mind guided her towards the source. Asterisk, What do you see, Anna? The orphanage. It was always the orphanage, wasn't it? A skeletal silhouette against a bruised twilight sky. Brick walls, stained with the grime of countless winters, rose up like silent sentinels. The windows, dark and vacant, stared back. At her judging, she could smell it now. The damp, musty odor of old wood and forgotten dreams. The air was thick with a palpable sense of loneliness, a profound absence of love. She was there, a ghost drifting through the corridors. The children, pale and thin, moved like shadows, their eyes hollow with a hunger that went beyond mere sustenance. They whispered amongst themselves, huddled in corners, seeking warmth in shared misery. She saw herself among them, a smaller, more fragile version, a child lost in a labyrinth of neglect. The guilt? It was a suffocating blanket, woven from regret and unspoken accusations. It clung to her, heavy and damp, making it hard to breathe. She had always felt it, this crushing weight on her chest, this nameless dread that shadowed her every waking moment. But now, in this twilight realm of memory, it was taking shape, solidifying into something she could almost grasp. She remembered the cold. The bone-chilling, relentless cold that seeped into everything. The thin blankets offered little respite, and the nights were long, filled with the restless coughs of the sick and the whimpers of the abandoned. She remembered the hunger, the gnawing emptiness that never truly went away, the constant craving for something, anything, to fill the void, and then the games. Desperate attempts to escape the bleak reality, hide and seek in the darkened corridors, whispers and giggles echoing through the empty rooms. Stories told in hushed voices, tales of faraway lands and magical creatures, anything to transport them, even for a little while, from this place of despair. Mark's voice echoed distantly, a reassuring presence in the periphery. He believed in this, in the possibility of healing, of finding a way out of the darkness. His unwavering support was a lifeline, a beacon of hope in the overwhelming despair. He saw progress, a crack in the wall of her repressed memories, a glimmer of understanding in her haunted eyes. He thought she was getting better. She wanted to believe it too. The details were coming into sharper focus. The names of the other children, Emily, Thomas, Lily. The stern face of the matron. Her lips perpetually pursed in disapproval. The creaking of the floorboards under her heavy footsteps. The flickering candlelight that cast long, dancing shadows. On the walls, then the fire. A primal scream ripped through her consciousness, a sound of pure terror and agony. Flames erupted, hungry and relentless, consuming everything in their path. The air crackled with heat, the smell of burning wood and flesh filling her nostrils. Children screamed, their cries lost in the roar of the inferno. She saw them trapped, their faces contorted in fear, their small hands reaching out for help that would never come. She tried to move, to pull them free, but her legs were frozen. Rooted to the spot, the heat intensified, pushing her back, suffocating her. And then an image. A single, crystalline image, cutting through the chaos like a shard of ice. Clear, unmistakable, undeniable. Herself, a younger Anna, no older than 7, kneeling in the shadows of the storage room. Her small hands trembled as she held a match, its flickering flame dancing in her eyes. Below her, a stack of newspapers, old linens, and kindling. Fuel for the fire. The match flared, casting a grotesque dance of light and shadow across her face. A face not of terror, not of innocence, but of fascination, curiosity. And then, the drop. The tiny spark falling onto the dry tinder. A silent ignition, a whisper of smoke. And then, the inferno. The therapist's voice, urgent now, pulling her back from the abyss. Asterisk Anna. Anna, can you hear me? Asterisk, she gasped, her lungs burning, her heart pounding in her chest. Sweat dripped from her brow, plastering her hair to her forehead. The room swam back into focus, the familiar surroundings of the clinic a stark contrast to the horrors she had just witnessed. Mark was there, his face etched with concern. He reached for her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. Asterisk, are you all right? What did you see? Asterisk, she couldn't speak. The image was burned into her retinas, seared into her soul. The truth, a monstrous, unimaginable truth, was staring back at her. It was her. It had always been her. The guilt had a name now, and it was a name she could no longer deny. A name that threatened to shatter everything she thought she knew about herself. A name that whispered of a darkness far deeper than she had ever imagined. How could she tell him? How could she face the monster she had been? The monster she might still be? The relief he felt, the hope that flickered in his eyes, was a cruel mockery of the reality she now held captive within herself. The music box. It wasn't a key to unlocking forgotten memories. It was a mirror reflecting a truth she had desperately tried to bury. And now the reflection was complete. The fire. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a tragedy she had simply witnessed. It was her creation. But why? What could drive a child to commit such an unspeakable act? The question echoed in the silence, a chilling prelude to a truth even darker than the flames themselves. The memories weren't her redemption, but her reckoning. Each fragmented image, each haunting whisper, had led not to a forgotten tragedy, but to a horrifying truth buried deep within her own soul. The shining child wasn't a victim, not a ghost calling out for justice, but a phantom reflection of her own making. The orphanage fire, the one that had haunted her nightmares for as long as she could remember, wasn't a tragedy she witnessed, but a sin she committed. The music box, that seemingly innocuous gift, wasn't a key to unlock her past, but a weapon aimed at her heart. Each note, each delicate chime, was a carefully calibrated reminder, a torment sent from the shadows to drag her into the light of her dark secret. It was never about remembering. It was always about retribution. Mark, his face etched with a fear she had never seen before, held the faded medical records as if they were evidence of a crime. The clinical language, the cold diagnoses of a troubled child, painted a portrait of someone she didn't recognize, someone capable of unspeakable things. Violent tendencies, they wrote, like a premonition etched in ink, a warning she had ignored. A truth she had desperately tried to bury. His eyes, once filled with unwavering love, now held a chasm of doubt, a landscape of broken trust. The foundation of their life together, built on shared dreams and whispered promises, crumbled into dust, leaving only the raw, jagged edges of her deception. Could he ever forgive the monster lurking beneath the surface of the woman he thought he knew? Could? She'll even forgive herself. Ilara, the old woman who seemed to possess an unnerving wisdom, a knowledge that stretched back through the years like the gnarled roots of an ancient tree, was more than just a concerned observer. She was the sole survivor, the last ember of Tika, of a fire that had consumed everything. She had watched it all burn, felt the searing heat on her skin, and carried the weight of that loss for decades. This wasn't about closure for her. It was about facing the child who had stolen her world, her gentle smile. Now, a chilling mask hid a lifetime of pain, a burning desire for answers. Why? That single word echoed in the silence, a question that demanded an impossible response. What could drive a child to commit such an act? What darkness could twist a young soul into a force of such destruction? The truth was a suffocating blanket, a suffocating weight, threatening to crush her. She had always felt like an outsider, a ghost haunting her own life. Invisible, unheard, a wisp of a child desperately searching for something, anything, to make her feel real. Was that emptiness the catalyst? Was that desperate need for attention the spark that ignited the inferno? The memories flooded back, sharper now, clearer, unforgiving. The smell of kerosene, the crackling of flames, the terrified screams, all orchestrated by her own hands. The shining child was a monster, and that monster was her. She had carried this secret, this burden of guilt, for so long, burying it beneath layers of denial and manufactured memories. Now, stripped bare, she was confronted with the terrifying reality of who she truly was. The melody of the music box, once a haunting lullaby, now sounded like a funeral dirge, each note a hammer blow against her sanity. It was a constant reminder of her sins, a cruel serenade that would follow her into the darkest corners of her mind. How could she ever escape the echoes of those flames, the shadows of her past? She looked at her hands, the hands that had once built beautiful things, designed spaces filled with light and hope, and saw only the instruments of destruction. Could these hands ever create again, or would they forever be stained with the ashes of the past? The faces of the children who perished in the fire swam before her eyes, their accusing gazes piercing her soul. They were trapped in that moment, forever frozen in their terror. While she had lived, breathed, and built a life on their ashes, how could she ever atone for such a betrayal? The world around her seemed to tilt, the familiar dissolving into a distorted nightmare. Mark's face, a mixture of horror and pity, was the last thing she saw before darkness threatened to engulf her once more. She was alone, truly alone, adrift in a sea of guilt and despair. Was this the end? Was this the moment when her carefully constructed world would finally crumble into nothingness? Or was there a glimmer of hope, a chance for redemption, buried somewhere within the ashes of her past? The answer, she knew, lay hidden in the depths of her shattered soul, waiting to be unearthed. And as the weight of her sins threatened to drown her, she knew one thing for certain. She had to face the fire again, this time with open eyes, and confront the child she used to be. But was she strong enough to confront the monster she had become? The truth, a monstrous bloom, had finally unfurled. Its petals, stained crimson with the hues of memory and shame, choked the air around Anna. The world, once painted in the soft, reassuring colors of normalcy, was now rendered in stark, unforgiving monochrome. She had sought answers in the whispers of the past, and the past had roared back. A deafening symphony of destruction with her as the conductor. The music box, once a beckoning siren, now sat silent, heavy as a tombstone on the table. It had unlocked more than just forgotten memories. It had unlocked a monster within her. It's a terrifying truth that threatened to consume her very being. Mark, his face, once a beacon of unwavering love and support, was now etched with a fear that mirrored her own. In his eyes, she saw not the woman he vowed to cherish, but a stranger, a phantom cloaked in a past he could never comprehend, a past he suddenly feared to be a part of. The silence between them was a vast, echoing canyon, each unspoken word a stone hurled into the abyss, widening the chasm that had formed between their souls. His touch, once a comfort, now felt like a brand, searing her skin with the knowledge of what she had done. She was poison to him now, a tainted thing he could no longer bear to be near. The house, their sanctuary, had become a prison, each room a stark reminder of the life she had built on a foundation of lies. The walls seemed to whisper accusations, the shadows dancing with the specters of children consumed by flames. Sleep offered no respite, only the relentless replay of the inferno, the crackling flames, the desperate screams, and the chilling image of a child, her child, bathed in the unholy light, holding the match that ignited the horror. Who was she? Was she the woman who loved Mark, who found solace in architecture, who yearned for a family? Or was she the monster, the shining child whispered about in hushed tones? The architect of a tragedy that had haunted this town for decades. The question echoed in the hollow chambers of her heart, unanswered, terrifying. She felt adrift, unmoored from the very essence of her being, a ghost haunting her own life. The reflection in the mirror was no longer familiar. The eyes staring back were haunted, devoid of innocence, reflecting a soul fractured beyond repair. Elara. The old woman, a figure shrouded in mystery, stood as a silent sentinel, a living embodiment of the past. Her eyes, ancient and knowing, held no malice, no rage, only an unsettling depth of sorrow. She had sought not revenge, but understanding. A terrifying notion, more terrifying than fire or hatred. Why? The question hung in the air, heavy with decades of unanswered pain. Why would a child commit such an act? What darkness could possess a soul so young, so innocent? Anna searched within herself, desperately seeking an explanation, a justification, anything to make sense of the incomprehensible. But there was nothing, only a void. A chilling emptiness where reason and understanding should have been. She remembered the orphanage, the cold, sterile environment, the relentless loneliness. A sea of faces, all yearning for attention, for love, for a place to belong. But she was invisible, a shadow flitting through the corridors, unnoticed, unheard. The constant feeling of being unseen, of being insignificant, had festered within her. A slow-burning resentment that had finally erupted in a catastrophic act of defiance. "I don't know," she whispered, the words barely audible, a fragile plea lost in the deafening silence. I felt invisible, unheard." The confession hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. A desperate attempt to bridge the unbridgeable gap between her past and her present. A broken offering to a woman whose life had been irrevocably scarred by her actions. A life now lived in the shadows of burning memories of orphaned children who could not live to grow old. The weight of her guilt pressed down on her, suffocating, unbearable. She had stolen not only lives, but also futures, possibilities, dreams, and for what? To be seen, to be heard. The price was too high, an eternal debt she could never repay. The world around her seemed to fade, the colors draining away until only Elara's face remained, etched with a profound sorrow that mirrored her own. The old woman's gaze was unwavering, piercing through the layers of denial and self-deception, exposing the raw, wounded soul beneath. A single tear traced a path down Anna's cheek, a testament to the unbearable weight of her sins. And in that moment of utter vulnerability, she knew what she had to do. The past could not be erased, but perhaps, just perhaps, she could find a way to atone for it. Perhaps it was not Alara, nor Mark, nor anyone in town that must forgive, but herself. But how could one forgive an act so heinous? Could she ever escape the inferno that raged within her soul? The questions swirled within her, unanswered, unresolved. A storm gathering on the horizon, the music box lay in wait. The silence promising to be broken by the sounds of her actions, and what would those sounds be? The truth had splintered her, leaving shards of memory lodged deep within, each one a fresh wound. How could she reconcile the woman she was with, the child who committed such an unspeakable act? Was she even worthy? Of the life she'd built, the love she'd known. The music box, that malevolent instrument of revelation, had stripped away the layers of denial, forcing her to confront the darkness she had so desperately tried to bury. There was no escaping it now. Its past had clawed its way into the present, demanding its due. But what was she to do with this truth? Could she simply disappear, vanish into the anonymity she had so carefully cultivated? No. The weight of her secret was crushing her, suffocating her with each passing breath. She had to unburden herself to confess, to offer herself up to the judgment of a town she had deceived. Perhaps, in facing the consequences, she could finally find a sliver of peace. Perhaps she could finally begin to forgive herself, if forgiveness was even possible. The music box sat before her, its intricate carvings now mocking, accusatory. It had been a Pandora's box, unleashing a torrent of forgotten horrors. Yet, it also held a strange beauty, a haunting melody that resonated with the deepest recesses of her soul. It was a song of loss, of innocence lost, of a childhood stolen. By a moment of inexplicable madness, her fingers trembled as she reached for it. This would be the final act, the last time she would unleash its sorrowful tune upon the world. But this time, it wouldn't be a private torment. This time, it would be a public confession, broadcast for all to hear. The town was quiet, the air thick with anticipation. The sun was setting, casting long, ominous shadows that seemed to mirror the darkness within her. She opened the music box. The melody drifted through the air, a mournful lament that echoed through the empty streets. It was a beacon, summoning the ghosts of the past, calling forth the memories that had haunted this town for so long. It was an admission of guilt, a plea for understanding, a desperate hope for redemption. As the final notes faded, a heavy silence descended. The air crackled with unspoken words, with the weight of years of unspoken pain. The music box was silent now, its work finally done. It had served its purpose, revealing the truth, no matter how terrible. Anna rose, her legs unsteady, her heart pounding in her chest. Fear warred with resolve, doubt wrestled with a fragile hope. She had made her choice. There was no turning back now. She would face the consequences, whatever they may be. She stepped out of the house into the gathering darkness. The town seemed to hold its breath, waiting, watching. The police station loomed in the distance, a stark symbol of justice, of accountability. With each step, she felt the weight of her past pressing down on her, threatening to crush her. Yet, she pressed on, driven by a force she couldn't explain. Perhaps it was a desire for punishment, a need to atone for her sins. Or perhaps it was a flicker of hope, a belief that even in the darkest of hearts, forgiveness could be found. Her face was etched with a mixture of dread and determination. This was it. The moment of truth, the culmination of a lifetime of secrets and lies. As she walked towards the station, she closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, bracing herself for the storm that was about to break. And then the camera shifts. Ilara stood alone in the heart of the town square. The music box, now silent, sat on the cobblestones before her. The haunting melody still reverberated in her mind, stirring up long-dormant memories. The fire, the screams, the faces of the children she had failed to save. Years had passed, but the pain remained, a constant companion. She had sought closure, not revenge. She had wanted to understand why a child would commit such an act. And now, after all these years, she finally had her answer. A single tear traced a path down her weathered cheek. It was a tear of sorrow, of pity, of understanding. She saw not a monster, but a broken child, lost in the darkness, desperate for attention, for love. Her gaze fell upon the music box, its intricate carvings shimmering in the fading light. And then she saw it. A barely visible inscription etched into the wood, almost hidden from view. A single word, a plea, a hope. Forgive. The silence that followed was absolute. But in the heart of that silence, a new question began to form, a haunting whisper that lingered in the air. Could she truly forgive? And more importantly, could she ever forgive herself for the choices she made in the aftermath of that terrible night? Or would the flames of the past continue to burn, consuming everything in their path?